Welcome to what is now Moving with Life and no longer Swinging with Life. The reason we are no longer swinging with life is because if you search iTunes podcast and type that in, you'll find that there's some extremely irrelevant topics and podcasts to what we're trying to do with our podcast. So I talked to the guys, they agreed, we changed it, we are now moving with life. Listeners, new and returning, please subscribe to our podcast. Leave some feedback, leave a review, let us know what you think, let us know maybe if we can improve on something. Any comments, questions, I will have some social media information posted on the show notes, so you can get that from there and then proceed to contact us as you wish. So episode 2, it's brief and it flew by. It flew by even for us. Very short compared to the first podcast. The first podcast, went over a good 2 hours, a little over 2 hours. So this one's really shrunk down. Mostly due to time constraint that we had, and no factor, we still got it done. I had developed a set of questions maybe a few months ago that I finally get to ask Eddie and Bryan in this episode, and I wasn't able to answer this set of questions for myself, so I will make it a point to answer them for episode 3 first, and then proceed with whatever agenda we have for that episode. For now, I'd like you to sit back, enjoy episode 2 of Moving with Life.
Prefer to be in trouble, but not really. Kind of, sort of. Never mind.
That's going on the first part of our podcast for the second one. All right, so we're back for the second day. Not second day, but second podcast. This one's going to be way more structured than what we did the first time. Like I said, at the beginning of the first podcast, it was just a conversation so people can get to know us. We did get some instant feedback, which was awesome. Thank you, Bianca and Justin, for giving us feedback like within 24 hours of releasing the podcast to iTunes and Stitcher. Really cool. Today, it's going to be just questions. It's going to be 4 questions that we're going to go through. I'll read one at a time. So, let's say we start with Eddie. I'll read 1, you answer it, and then 2, answer it, and then we'll move forward, and then go to Bryan, and then I'll do me at last, depending on how much time we have left.
Okay.
That'd be the way it's going to go. So we're going, for the people listening, we're going to get right into it, not waste anybody's time. If you could summarize your childhood from the time you can recall memories up until about the age of 10, which is about up to about middle school, what would you say? How would you describe it?
Summarizing my childhood, I guess I don't know. I feel like I was definitely an oddball. Like I was like a weird kid. I was like very small. Like in size, I was just like I didn't get my growth spurt until like sophomore year of high school. And so when I became a freshman in high school, I was still under 5 feet. Like I was 4'9" going into freshman year. If that gives you a picture of how short I was forever up until sophomore year of high school. So like middle school, elementary school, that whole age, that span of age, I was short. And so I started to grow disinterested with my sports primarily. And that's like one thing I'd always had like going with sports. So I got really disinterested with that because of my height challenge, because I enjoyed playing first base in baseball. And now suddenly I can't play first anymore because I'm short as hell.
Everybody's grown, yeah.
Yeah, so I got a lot more into the music side of things, and that's really where I started. That's really where I really was figuring out that I just wanted to do music forever. And then, but I was just a really weird kid, man. I was really like into weird stuff and like not into like anything that everyone else seemed to be into, music wise and like sports wise and dress wise. Like my mom still dressed me, so I was just kind of going off of that. But I feel like I had friends, but I had very close friends, but I never had many friends. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I don't know. I've always felt like I've been hanging out in the back.
All right.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay, now moving forward from there. In retrospect, what changes did you see happen from middle school until graduating high school? So basically, all of your adolescence, all of the teenage years, before going to college. Now that you look back at it, like how was that for you?
You're talking about like into the high school years now, pretty much? Or?
Well, adolescence, so you're growing. You're going through. Now everybody's having their growth spurts, and you're not yet. You don't have it till sophomore year. So all of that time, and then high school. Then from sophomore year, maturing physically but also mentally. How did it progress from then on to you graduated high school?
I don't know if it progressed a lot. I wouldn't say like much of my I guess like the way I think now. I've only feel like I've been wrapped up in the way I think now, maybe like since I've been out of college, to be honest, which I'm sure you're probably going to bring up in a little bit, so we'll get there. But I guess like the way I was thinking about things, thinking about the world in high school was very just like over my head, man. Like I was like so wrapped up in what I was doing with like orchestra and music and jazz and like in mariachi, and I just wanted to do everything and anything that was music related. And so I was like, I quit playing tennis, I quit doing all of that, and my friend group kind of pretty much stayed the same within like the music realm of people, specifically orchestra, and so I was just really wrapped up in that, man. Like and all the rest of the world was just always just over my head. I was so like narrowed in on I guess my little bubble at the time.
Yeah. Okay, so now third question: how was college? How did you transform through college from the day you knew that you got accepted to the university until the day you walked for graduation college?
So I knew I wanted to go to Belmont University, which is in Nashville, Tennessee. I knew I wanted to go there since the day that I met my voice coach, who's I guess we're gonna edit out names.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I forget. I won't say
your
his
voice
name.
coach. It's fine.
But yeah. So I'd met my voice coach, who is from Nashville and teaches at Belmont, and so he basically was gonna drag me by my ass up there. So I was like, okay, I'm going up there. But I was happy. I was like excited. So this all happened when I was 16 years old, and I believe that was junior year of high school. After that happened, I checked out of everything. So I was like super excited to go to college, and get out of high school. So like graduation couldn't have come any sooner from that point on, from 16 years old and on. And so once I got to college, I didn't know anyone going to that school. Obviously, it's a very small private university. It's like, I think the size of my class, like in college, is probably like 6,000 some. No, that was like the size of the whole school. I'm lying. My class was probably like between 1,500 and 2,000 kids. I think it was like very small school. It was like 6,000 total at the time. I think now it's like at 9. It's growing pretty fast. But even then, it's still really small.
So yeah, it's still relatively small compared to even UTRGV and even where I went, TAMUCC.
Yeah. So anyways, I didn't know anyone, and I was going for music and I was going for voice, which is like the one thing in high school I never did. I never did choir. I was in jazz, mariachi, orchestra, I guess band. I didn't do band. But regardless, I was kind of more or less all over the place, mm-hmm. right? But singing was like, forget about it. So my learning curve was that much steeper. So I had to learn how to really dig in and how to read choral music and follow choral directors, which feels like it's I'm sure it's similar, but it feels way different when you're coming from 7 years of orchestra directors and orchestra conducting. Yeah. So I was just in a very foreign world when I went to college, like on all levels. Like educationally, I was in a foreign world, and like geographically, obviously, I was in a foreign world, and environmentally and like and all that. It gets colder up there, and I hate the cold, can't stand it. And of course, I didn't know anyone. So I had to like make my own friends, or my new friends or whatever. So a lot of that became my roommates. And so a couple of my roommates were very just like open-minded, philosophical people. And that's where my mind really started to shift. I went from being this narrow, like, teenager, I guess, into now I'm 18. And my mind was just like, oh, shit. Yeah, I never imagined like other 18-year-olds like talking about like opening up their minds the way that these dudes were, and they had just such different perspectives. Being like one of my roommates was from West Virginia, and another one was there from Tennessee, and then another one, I guess the other one was still from Tennessee, but from a couple more hours down, like East Tennessee, which is like it might as well be a different state from Middle and West Tennessee because of the time change mainly. So. But yeah, and then it's just such a hipster school, like completely opposite of what I was then. such a hipster school. So like there's a lot of like smokers, and there's like just a lot of different personalities and just a lot of different kinds of cats going around. And Belmont was like one of those schools that like has a lot of people from from every different state, like all the 50 United States and all the 50 states, right? And then some. Like we'd get people from Africa, like coming in to run track for the school or whatever, and then people coming in from Africa just to study under vocal or to study music business. People from Australia, and like it was nuts, man. So like meeting everyone from different backgrounds is like super just challenging and mind opening. And then my political views, that we won't get like too into that, but my political views back then definitely leaned a very hard right, very hard Republican, and because that's pretty much for the most part how my parents are, and that's kind of like what I've been taught and how I've been raised.
Right.
And my roommates were very, very far other side. So adding that in, that's like even more of a mind opener. And then one of my roommates was also an atheist, so then I had that. Other perspective.
Yeah, because up until that point, you probably were not. You hadn't been introduced to somebody like that, of that belief, ever up until then. That's interesting.
Yeah, it was very, and I still like pretty religious back then too. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it was a pretty big deal for me. And then like going through all the experiences and all the endless stories, we could have multiple podcasts about just me like telling stories from college, as I'm sure anyone really could about their college experience. Mm-hmm. But it was just very overwhelmingly mind-opening. So like that's like where I really started to get challenged with everything: politics, religion, meaning of life, like everything like that. It's pretty nuts.
A lot of the key factors that help shape you anyways, that you grew up learning for the first 17 years of your life, and now all of that, every single thing is being challenged. That's very interesting to me.
Yeah. And like middle school and high school, like I feel bad because I feel like I couldn't like give much information about that, but it was that narrow. Like I don't have much to say except like everyone down here that we went to school with, at least like to me, in my opinion, like everything's very monotone in the sense like everyone's very like narrowed in and like centered on the way of life down here, and there's not a lot of variety down here to the way that people are living. Mm-hmm. And and the way people view things politically, religiously, like everyone here is pretty much dominantly Catholic for the most part. Hardly any Catholicism in Middle Tennessee. So it's another one of those things.
Right. Yeah, and even for like those who did move away for college maybe and then ended up moving back because maybe it was too much change. It's not that it's not a good or bad thing. It's just you're experiencing change, and sometimes you don't feel like there's time to like to adapt. You don't understand like, or you're not given like the guidance, I guess, to do that. Because I know for me, I moved back after college the first time, so we'll get to me in a bit. But I definitely see that, and then like people that we know that move back home because it's like to me, I hear a lot of excuses about it being money which I don't believe. Now I don't believe, but I can get to that. I'll get to that later. But yeah, very interesting as far as change.
And it was also interesting to see people collapse under a huge change like that. For me, I was just so mentally ready for a getaway from the valley. Like I was the kid who was just like ready to leave and say like, basically like, not that I like feel this way now, but like, fuck your hometown, fuck my hometown. So it's like, I wanted to get out and basically go live and have those kind of experiences. But it was interesting to see other people that I met very early on at Belmont at school just collapse under a very drastic change. And Belmont's like very harsh with their rules and their regulations with alcohol, with drugs and all that stuff. And there are people that came from very easygoing like families, like their parents were cool with them drinking or cool with them smoking pot or whatever, and no judgment. I really don't care, but Belmont really cared.
Yeah, so Belmont was sure that their brand was going to stay consistent.
Christian values, private Christian school. Mm. So yeah, like a lot of people were collapsing, having to deal with very strict sets of rules. And so a lot of people either got suspended from breaking those rules once or twice or too many times, or some people just said screw it and left, and a lot of the latter. So
interesting. Okay, so you go through college, you go through all this intense change. How was it a year, like your first year from when like you graduated, you walked that first year out of college?
So this is where this is where my life really starts to just like blossom as far as, you know, my own opinion, because middle school, again, just very narrowed, like everything's very basic, day in, day out, school, same set of friends, same set of values, whatever, no challenge, right? That's middle school and high school. College starts to open up a lot more, meeting new people, lots of different walks of life, right? And even then, like my first year out of college, living on my own and trying to figure out stuff myself, like that experience in itself, just nothing else has compared to that or come close. And college was this huge transformative thing for me, as far as how I came to see life and think about religion, politics, what I wanted to do and my purpose, and overall what I wanted to do with my life and how I wanted to leave my mark on the earth. And so the first year I was out of college, okay, so I guess dialing it back a bit, what I was used to in college, my sophomore year, halfway through my sophomore year of school, I started seeing this girl, and we ended up dating for about 2.5, close to 3 years. And I basically broke up with her the day after I graduated school. It's a very cliche story, but I'd gone to a friend of mine's wedding the day after I graduated. So I graduated on Star Wars Day that year, so May 4th, 2014. May the 4th be with you. That's when I graduated. May 5th, I go to my friend's wedding, and I'm there stag. My girlfriend was just at her apartment by herself, and it's one of those things, like, it's a very small wedding, and like I felt awkward like asking, like, hey, can my girlfriend tag along, whatever. It's a very, very small wedding. And so I go to the wedding, and it's, again, very cliche, but I see my buddies, like the look in his eyes as his bride is walking down the aisle, and I'm like, dude, like, that's intense and incredible, and I'm never going to feel that way about this girl. So I'm, like, doing myself an injustice. Worse, I'm doing her an injustice. Like, I don't want to treat anyone that poorly. So, for her, like, for me, she came first in that sense, right? Like, I'm doing her an injustice. So I get out of the wedding. I know exactly what I need to do. Like, I rush home. I change out of my formal attire. I cannot stand being in formal attire. And I go to her apartment, break up, explain why, and, like, we both said our piece. It was, like, the most peaceful breakup ever. Like, obviously there were still, like, tears involved. Like, we'd been through this thing 2.5 years or whatever, and, like, hung out all the time, every day, and just, like, genuinely enjoyed each other. But, like, for a lot of reasons, it just wasn't going to work out. So, so it was a hard thing. But so I basically began my adult life having to readjust my life and get used to being by myself again and not seeing, or, basically being attached at the hip to another person every day. So it was just a weird readjustment. And then for the first year I was out of college, I'd come home for 6 months or 4 months at a time, whatever, 3 to 6 months, and then go back to Nashville, 3 to 6 months, and then just rotate. Like, I always had my bags packed. So I was, like, closing both closets, basically. Like, I wasn't really set living anywhere. So that really complicated my sanity, for the most part, because I wasn't settled anywhere. And, it was like every time I'd leave, I'd have to, like, come back, get a new job, and then quit that job, and come back, and then go back, get a new job, until I could find a job that, like, was self-scheduled pretty much, which was the security job. I'd self-schedule. So I was trying to figure out how to pay bills and then how to finance this record. And so I was just writing a lot. And that's really where, self-plug here, with the music. But but that's really where, like, a lot of the songs for 17 Hours came in, because that 17-hour drive between Edinburgh, Texas and Nashville, Tennessee was, like, that whole first year out of college for me, man, was just, like, me trying to figure out how to, take care of myself and really figure out how I'm going to do this thing and how I'm going to make it through this month, and how am I going to actually ever do what I want to do if I have to work 3 jobs and constantly be tired. So it's a lot to deal with, and being an adult sucks.
It's good.
It's a good challenge. I guess it was a lot of, like, a lot more self-growth, and I guess, like, my mind was pretty much, like, opened, and I was educated, if you will. And so at that point, first year out of college, it's just all about learn how to do shit now. Learn how to take care of yourself, feed yourself, work, do a whole bunch of shit you don't want to do. So I don't know if I can elaborate much more off of that.
No, that's good. That's good. It definitely gives insight to our listeners. That's the point of I came up with these questions actually several months ago when the idea of a podcast became solidified. It was just a matter of when it was going to start. I definitely wanted to get to this point with you guys as far as letting listeners get a little more in-depth but directional, I guess, a mini biography on you guys and myself as well. Well, good to me, but all right, Bryan, it's your turn. If you could summarize your childhood from the time you can recall memories to age 10, what would you say? How would you describe it?
I was very different from who I am today, and I know that's like obvious, right? But like when I was little, I always remember being the class clown and like talking too much to everybody, and just I was all over the place. I knew a lot of people, and everybody knew. I guess at least in elementary, everybody knew who I was because I was always just I was just like making a scene, I was a funny guy and whatnot. And now I'm like the complete opposite. I keep to myself a lot, and I don't like interacting with a lot of people outside of my immediate circle of friends. But yeah, those were very, very fun times. I had friends that I saw every day, like neighborhood friends. We'd always be outdoors doing things, having adventures, just on our bikes, exploring the neighborhood, exploring anywhere we could go at 7, 8, 9, 10 years old. So my elementary years, we'll call it, were very, very awesome, despite everything else, which we might get into later on down the road of this podcast. But from the way I remember them, they were very awesome. I loved those times, and anytime that I feel like my life gets a little overwhelming or I just a little stressed with adult stuff, I like to think back to those times because they're like a little happy place.
Good. I know. Yeah, I remember. I mean, I know you recall. I recall you tell me like just stories. You and your friends go out like on bike rides and stuff. You guys just go and be out for all hours until the evening, and then coming home late. And it's crazy because you got to think for those listening. This is back in the '90s. So even then, for us back then, if I feel like we could do stuff compared to now, we could do stuff like that. Yeah. Your parents could say, "Okay, just be home before 5 or whatever."
Before dark.
Yeah, before dark. Yeah, before sun goes down.
I think the rule was when the street lights start to come on, that's when you got to get home. Before the street lights come on.
Yeah, I rarely listen to that.
You're just like, you sound like the most like I can already picture you and your friends riding down the streets in your bikes like you're like in the Sandlot or some shit.
Honestly, like it was something like that. The Sandlot, they probably had a little more intense experiences, but it was definitely something like that. We were just out adventuring on our bikes, getting into mild trouble.
That's so cool. I feel like some people that might be a little cliche, but I believe in a lot of cliches, and I think it's pretty awesome when somebody experiences that. All right. So in retrospect now, during for your adolescent years, how was that? How do you see that? Adolescence, middle school, high school.
I think for sure in middle school I was still kind of a class clown, and I remember getting into a lot of trouble for not knowing when to shut up. Always getting in trouble. I was talking too much or not paying attention, and I think that whole not paying attention in class sort of dragged along even into college a little bit. So it was I learned a lot, not in class, or maybe in class, but not about the material that was being taught. I just learned a lot about like myself, and I became more like socially aware. So in middle school, I was still a class clown, always talking too much, And then going into high school, I definitely started to keep to myself a little more, but it was kind of, I don't want to sound like, too cocky or anything, but I started finding my niche. I started finding my thing in high school, which was band. It was jazz band. It was, playing for all Valley, all region, and all that stuff. So I think that kind of put me in the spotlight sometimes, and I don't usually like being in the spotlight, but that made me feel good about what I was doing, because everything, my life before that, I never really had a thing, people were in sports, people were funny, and I was funny, but to me, it wasn't the best thing to be. So when I had my thing, just me and my sax, and apparently, I was good enough to get some recognition. That really made me aware of a lot of different things, and it kind of, naturally you mature, but I got to know me a little better, and other than that, my friends made it an awesome experience. The group of friends we had at the time, and growing up through those years together, it was very awesome. And I feel like I've always had a really, really cool life, and in high school was definitely because of my friends. You go through life, and different people live life differently, and different things happen, good and bad, and my friends definitely helped me a lot through high school, growing up into that through those years. So those were awesome times, and I learned to play the sax.
Yeah, I was gonna say, so basically anything that had to do with the sax, you were there.
Yeah,
Anything.
it was my thing, and it felt good to finally have a thing. Eddie won the talent show in middle school, and
I did.
Andy, I remember it. And then and Andy, he plays baseball. He's on the drum line, and then I finally had my thing, and it was a very awesome thing to experience, especially with my friends.
And just so this goes on the record for everybody listening, Bryan is a killer fucking saxophone player, fucking good. I remember being at Belmont, and Belmont's jazz group is fucking incredible. They always kill it. Whatever the hell they're doing, they're just killing it. And I remember thinking Bryan could easily fit into this group, and he would just play circles around these kids, man. You could have easily fit into some really good jazz groups. Bryan's fucking awesome.
I'm still trying to convince him to go into it, but we'll get there. I have to flank a little more, a little harder.
Well, thank you, Eddie, for that. Yeah, I mean, I still definitely play every once in a while. I just, going into college, I made the decision that I didn't believe I could make a living off of it, so I didn't pursue it as a career.
What did you do? What was your major in college?
My major in college, after about a switch or two, it turned to be finance, and which is very far from what I wanted to do. I wanted to study architecture, but for reasons outside of my control, I ended up studying here at home, and I took an accounting class or two in high school, and I was like, you know what, I like accounting. I took classes, I got A's. I understand it, I like it, so let me do accounting. So then I did accounting, and those classes that I took in high school, they ended up not transferring. So I had to retake those accounting classes, and they totally killed my accounting dream. And it's weird to say that people had accounting dreams, but I did at some point, and those teachers killed me, and I was like, screw accounting, I don't like it. I took a finance course. I was like, you know what, finance is more my thing. So I majored in finance in college, and college was very eye-opening to a lot of things, especially my business classes. They kind of opened my eyes to the real world, the shit that happens after you graduate, the things you have to worry about, and the things that other people deal with, and corporate America deals with. So that opened my eyes in that sense. And another big part of college for me was joining a fraternity. And I say that was a big it was like a big change, a big deal for me, because it took me back to my roots. So I always, I was born in Mexico, and I always spoke Spanish at home and everything. But I spent a lot of time with my friends also outside of school. So I was always with my English speaking friends, basically 24/7. So in college, I started spending more time with my fraternity brothers, and a lot of them were very, very deeply connected to their Mexican roots, and it kind of like took me back, and I was like, hey, I've kind of been away from this stuff, and I forgot how cool it is, and how different it is from hanging out with my English speaking friends, and doing all the all the English speaking stuff, and the traditional American things. And it took me back in a different direction, and it was honestly it was awesome. It's good. It's cool to be to have your mind in two cultures, and to be able to speak to different languages. And it was an awesome experience. College really did open my eyes in those aspects, open up my mind, I guess.
What was your first year out of college like?
My first year out of college was very mild, I would call it. It was not a lot happened except getting a job in a bank, and not being a teller, but being more on the the back office end, and working in an environment with like no windows, at least in the department I was in at that time. It was very mild, but it was like I was finding my place in corporate America. It was I didn't know what I could do, what I could get away with. I went from being a college student in a fraternity to just another employee. Just basically, I like to think of it as just another number on the books, on the pages. It was, I felt very subdued, if I guess you could say. It was just super mild, and I constantly wanted to find things to do, to make my life a little more interesting. And I guess in doing so, I still kind of tried to open up my mind to other things. And I'm just it put me in a mindset that I'm always going to be learning, and I always want to be learning. So I was always kind of like trying to talk to other employees, and see what kind of work they do, and what kind of things they like to do outside of work, and just get to know like the different types of people within people, if that makes sense.
Or you're gonna say something, Eddie?
Not necessarily. I was actually going to draw a parallel back really quick to your fraternity experience, because I had a similar experience. Not the Mexican root part, obviously, but man, like living in Tennessee made me basically white. But anyway, yeah, we could. Everyone's always like, "Oh, you have like that little Southern accent." Like, no, I don't. I've always talked like this. Apparently, I have not always talked like this. Anyways, going back to the topic at hand. So, I was very like anti-fraternity in college, but one of my best friends was in a fraternity, and he convinced me to rush at the beginning of sophomore year. And I was like, oh, all right, like I'll give it a try, whatever. And like what I saw with this group of guys was like, whoa, like these are the dudes I need to surround myself with to like further like open my mind and grow as a person. And like there's a very eclectic group of guys, man, like everyone very different from one another, but everyone super united for like brotherhood and philanthropy and growing as individuals. And I was like super all in on that. So I learned so much from those dudes, and really like the last like several years of college, like junior and senior year, like those dudes, I mean, still some of my best friends obviously, and like bring them up all the time. But I actually had to drop senior year because of like financial reasons. Like, I just couldn't keep up with it anymore. So I dropped senior year, but I mean, basically still brothers, man. Like, talk to those dudes all the time, and there's like huge influences on my life constantly.
Yeah, I think we've had this conversation before, me and Eddie, how I was super anti fraternity also until I met my chapter brothers now. Like those guys, that sense of brotherhood, like, and there's a lot of like smack talk about fraternities in general, and for the most part I agree with it, just because there's not all fraternities are the same, and not all people are the same, obviously. I just happened to run into like a really great group of guys who always pushed me to strive for more. Without them, I really don't think that I would have done much of anything I did my like last 2 years of college. So I'm really thankful for running into them.
I'll tell you this much too from my experience. If I had not joined that fraternity and become like best friends and brothers with those guys, I feel like my life would be completely different. If I would have still been hanging out with the people I was hanging out with freshman year of college and like seeing where they've ended up now, not that they're leading bad lives of any sort, but if I would have still been running with those people, I'd be super different and not as concerned with a lot of things I'm concerned with now, as far as being a good human goes and being good to other people and making sure you're doing something productive with your life.
Yeah.
Things like that I would not be thinking about if I hadn't joined this fraternity.
Cool. Very nice. I feel, from my perspective for you guys, I've known you guys for a long time, so this stuff is relative to what we talk about on a daily basis. We are running out of time for this episode, so we're going to hold off on my backstory.
No, we're not. You better go.
We will hold off till the next time. This is Millennials Swinging with Life.